Welcome to the Poisoning Podcast. I'm your host, Erin DeLullo. Today's guest is Dale King. He lives in Ohio, a sister state to West Virginia, and Ohio's been hit very hard by the opioid epidemic and fentanyl poisoning. He was a special forces veteran from the Iraq War, came home to his small town in Ohio, and got involved in CrossFit. Now he uses CrossFit in helping addicts recover. Welcome to the show.
Hey,
Dale.
pleasure.
Glad you're here. Yeah, and I'm sitting in West Virginia.
Oh,
So
God bless you.
yeah, West by God, and I'm in a place called the Eastern Panhandle, and I haven't done this for our viewers yet, but this is West Virginia, and
There
I'm
you
like over here.
go. There you go.
But the whole state, new numbers came out recently, our numbers from last year, and we are still in the wrong direction when it
Yeah.
comes to opioids and fentanyl poisoning.
Yeah.
So this issue is so important. But I wanted to start with your military background, and would you tell us how you think this prepared you for the work you're doing today?
Yeah. Hindsight is a great tool. When I was first of all, I was in the Army. I was a Army intelligence officer, and I spent 2 deployments to Iraq, like '03 to '07 time frame. And I had a really cool experience being assigned to 10th Special Forces Group, and they have kind of all bunch of unique different mission sets, but one of them is kind of what's known as foreign internal defense. And so they deploy small teams across foreign countries, and those guys become force multipliers to foreign armies, helping them. A 12-person team advises like 1,000-person unit to help counterinsurgency operations, and with the end goal of providing stability and security to that country. And so that's what we did. Like we deployed overseas, and then we had different missions each deployment, but the second one was training and advising the Iraqi Special Operations Forces. And that was a very unique and memorable experience.
And what year did you come back to the States?
I got out of the Army in '07. So,
Okay.
yeah. Yep.
And you came right back to Ohio then?
Yeah, boomerang back to Portsmouth, Ohio. Never thought I would come back to my hometown, but got an opportunity to work for Department of Energy, and so that's why I came back home.
Well, the same. I came back home after not in Iraq, but being in Washington, D.C. for over a decade. So what did you come back home to?
Yeah, so we had pumped all this. I mean, we had pumped all this blood and treasure into Iraq to develop that country, and at the same time, like my hometown was just being rotted and decayed from within. So I left in '99 and was gone till '07, and that was the first kind of wave
Yep.
of pain clinics and pill mills, and a lot of guys I went to high school with were on drugs or using, and businesses were gone. Portsmouth kind of became just like a national laughing stock, as kind of where the pill mills really that business model started. And so I just came home to like a completely different town that I remember growing up.
So the opioid epidemic ravaged your town, like it ravaged so many small towns in
Mhm.
Appalachia and the Rust Belt. And you then began a gym.
Yeah, yeah, kind of an unorthodox
Right.
approach. Yeah. So I started really getting into CrossFit when I was leaving the military, and it was a great kind of therapeutic outlet for me at the
Mm-hmm.
time. Because you don't know what you don't know. And in my case, was just trying to reintegrate back into society, and reintegrate back to my hometown. That I was just really struggling with. Why did we go through all this effort and sacrifice overseas to come home, and no one seemed to care? And like, even so, the Portsmouth was just being rotted from within from the opioid crisis. And so I had a lot of anger issues, just trying to figure out what was it all worth. And kind of, I also was struggling with really like I didn't have a mission or purpose anymore. Um, and like a unit to belong to. So long story short, after being home for a couple years, really just God led me down the path of opening up my own kind of small little gym. And that gym gave me a unit to belong to, and a new mission to serve. And I was just kind of making people healthy and strong and capable.
And when did the addicts become part, or the people who are addicted to these pills become part of your gym?
Yeah, so that really didn't happen until about 2018.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
That late. Okay.
yeah. So it was several years, and the gym had allowed me a couple other entrepreneurial endeavors from that, and I had quit working for the Department of Energy, and now I was kind of like full time in the wild as a business owner, trying to figure it out. And the reason it happened is a really good friend of mine, Billy, approached me one day, and he said, "Hey, like, coming here in this gym has been really instrumental in my own personal recovery, and I've accepted a new position as a general counsel at a local treatment center, and I'd like for us to figure out a way to partner together, and you guys provide classes to our clients and staff." And that's how it started.
I would say I don't remember the years, but this was definitely pre-COVID,
Hmm.
maybe pre first wave of the opioid epidemic. My husband and I had a friend when we were living in Washington, D.C., and he obviously had an addictive personality. And as
Hmm.
long as he was running marathons, he was fine. He wasn't seeking any treatment.
Right.
But and it is before I got involved with Narcan and naloxone and everything going on and this poisoning that our country is experiencing.
Yeah.
But I knew I was like, if the moment he's like got injured or stopped running for some reason, the bad addiction habits
Mm.
came out, and at one point it cost him to lose his job.
Yep.
And I think running, he had the community, he had a purpose, a feeling that it gave him.
Hmm.
That's obviously a little different than CrossFit, but I think still the same underlying
Yeah,
principles.
yeah, yeah. It's a physical outlet, and that's key. Is like we tell people all the time. It's like we're pretty agnostic about what physical outlet you choose, but your body is an integrated unit. And for I mean, my personal opinion is a lot of the take addiction out of it.
Yeah.
The mental health crisis that our country is facing is
Mhm.
because it's a physical health crisis first and foremost. It's a lack of physical capacity, and that manifests itself mentally. So we need to focus on both mental and physical health.
Oh, 100% agree. So, our mutual contact, Paul Solitaroff of Rolling Stone, is the
Yeah,
one that put us together. And I'm going to read an excerpt because he's such a good
he
writer.
is a good
And
writer.
then
Yeah.
I'll let you respond.
Okay.
Um, an inpatient bed following a week of detox, an outpatient bed for months of subsidized housing, a suite of apprenticeships in the buildings, trades that convert to full-time jobs. And lastly, the secret sauce, the Portsmouth touch. 4 or 5 days a week of endurance training in kettlebell gyms like this one. Those sweatbox sessions turns addicts into athletes and athletes into CrossFit assassins. The tribal vibes are fierce in this building. former junkies with Popeye forearms, power clean, 200 pounds, and run trails shoeless. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, oh, yeah. I haven't read that in quite a long time, but, um, to me, that portrays the power of community. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it, and I, people gave me, um, that the community at that gym really helped me when I needed it most in my life. And that's something I've
Mm-hmm.
never forgotten. And just to be able to instill that belief in others is really fulfilling and rewarding to me, especially to a segment of the population who've just suffered a lot, um, really felt isolated and ashamed. Is all we just try to do is show them what they're capable of and see what transpires after that.
That's beautiful. So in 2018, you partnered with the Counseling Center.
Hmm.
And how does that program work right now?
Yeah, so they've really taken that program and accelerated it, and they've internalized it themselves. So we helped them build it up, and they have their own gym now. They have their own full staff of trainers,
Mm.
and they've really taken the approach that physical fitness is an alternative therapy to substance use disorder. So they've really, I mean, just to see back in 2018, we just hoped somebody would show up.
Okay.
We had no funding, no equipment, and to see that it basically clients now can have a path to employment as trainers, and train the trainer, and that thing grows virally. It's really impactful, and currently we're just trying to take that model and export it to as many different towns and locations as possible.
Oh, how far have you expanded?
Well, we're getting there.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah,
Just curious.
we're in the on the ground floor phase. So we have some things kind of cooking, but you know, physical fitness is a hard sell, unfortunately, to treatment centers who are really good at what they do, as far as the counseling side of it and the social work side of it. But just to get them to be receptive and acceptive of something new is a little challenging, but we're getting there.
Do you think it might be because there's competition from drug companies that is there? I mean, did I hit a nerve? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know how far you want me to dive down
Oh,
that.
you can say anything you want, Dale. I
Oh,
even said you could cuss earlier, so I
yeah,
just leave it for
yeah.
my kids.
I mean, it's just like it's like they're getting ready to subsidize Ozempic, but they won't even give you like a tax break for a gym membership. Like it's completely
Right.
the incentives are wrong. If big pharma can't profit from it, it's not going to happen. And it's just really frustrating to see that pharma is the reason the uh, the biggest reason we're in this position. And they'll cough up a couple $1 million in a settlement, but they're going to make billions off of other products the same way. It's just really just disgusting to me.
Are you involved in trying to get funding from the Ohio Opioid Abatement Commission from
Yeah,
the settlement
so
dollars?
the first round for grants went
Yeah.
out. We submitted, and so what we submitted, and I'll just make it really quickly,
Sure. Yeah.
is basically we even had a program to where we partnered addicts and law enforcement together, and it was like
Wow.
a day long training, and that was just something that came about because obviously our work is very focused on substance use disorder, but first responders and law enforcement personnel are obviously on the front line of this,
Yeah.
and they are getting really scarred with what they're having to see every day. Um, I mean, with over 100,000 people dying nationally from overdose, it's the firefighters and law enforcement are the ones that are going out there dealing with that, and that's no one should have to deal with that amount of death. Um, on a daily basis, and rightfully so. Like you can become very calloused to the other side, and that's my personal background. That's how my belief used to be. Like it's the addict's fault, and they're
Mm-hmm.
the ones who got themselves in their situation. But anyways, so we're really good about creating community through fitness, and we just had like a half day thing where we invited local law enforcement and we invited folks in treatment, and we put them on the same squad and had them work out together. Um, and some of our guys were
I
just
like.
really enjoyed it because they they were in better shape than the cops, and they were running circles around them. But most importantly, at the end of the workout, we have a like almost like a group therapy session.
Mm.
And I think personally, like the law enforcement guys got more out of it than the addicts. Just relaying like, hey, my sister was in active addiction and she died a year
Yeah.
ago. And I just want you guys to know, like, we're not trying to get you to lock you up. Like, we just want to do what's right for you. And just so we're creating opportunities for commonality. And, through the experience of the documentary, like media is such a powerful outlet for this. And so basically we put in for a grant to have as many 1 day seminars of this and then film it at the same time and have a produce a YouTube series. So we're just waiting to see if that grant idea gets picked up.
Oh, well, I'll pray that it does. It seems
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great. Um, so what is special about CrossFit though with this type of healing in a recovery?
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, we from the neurochemical response from high intensity workout, um, is one aspect of it. Like
Hmm.
we're able to change brain chemistry pretty quick through elevating the heart rate and getting it up there. Um, but but most importantly, it's the shared suffering, really. So
Mm.
um, if five of us can go through a workout and it's led by a qualified professional coach, so we don't get hurt, obviously, and then bridging in kind of cognitive behavioral therapy into it and getting them to understand like, hey, we're using the physical stress as a way to accelerate psychological healing. And doing that in the community setting in a team environment is really kind of the secret sauce. It's the equalizer. And then, as I've said before, is you go through that hard shared experience together, and then you spend 5-10 minutes during a cool down talking about, hey, how can we use the cues or the coaching to get us through the workout and apply that to the other 23 hours um, of the day when things get really hard outside of the gym.
In the documentary, I even saw that some people were working out twice a day. I was like, that's a goal I wish I had. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's
It's
funny.
impressive.
It's funny. It's like some of my guys who've gone on to become coaches and now coach other folks. In the beginning, our job is kind of more to pull them off the ledge and instead of having to push them up the hill. But yeah,
That's great. So there's been controversy, though. I think some of your local elected officials
yeah.
didn't care for your program.
Well, it's not that necessarily that they didn't care for our program. Well, okay, they didn't care for our program,
Yeah,
um,
see, there you go.
but they just were anti treatment in general, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's a very difficult opponent to face. But I felt I had a role in that because I used to be in that camp. Um,
Oh,
because like I said, like to me, whenever I'd see these people going to treatment or walking up and down downtown streets, I'd just be like, well, there you go. They're the mascot. They're the reason the downfall for the town. Um, and like, in their defense a little bit, like Portsmouth's been dealing with this since the mid '90s.
yeah.
So they went through the pain clinics and seeing what that brought. And now they to me, they still need somebody to hate on a little bit. And that's gone from pain clinics to treatment agencies in a way. because there are, there are some bad actors out there, and they ruin it for the rest of the folks doing it the right way.
Well, and even, I mean, I just think the system is, from doing all these interviews now, I mean, I hate to say corrupt, but, someone who's addicted to opioids needs more than a 30-day inpatient
Yep.
stay.
Yep.
And we interviewed here last week a gentleman who runs a county day center. So the courts will refer nonviolent drug users
Sure.
or drug addicts to him. And it's just so, what I think people don't understand about recovery is you basically lost everything, right? You're arrested, most likely. And then he'll get someone through recovery 12 months, but they lose their Medicare because they get a job, but then they have hepatitis because they were a user, and the medication is like $3,500 a month. So how do you bridge that gap? And because he's funded by government grants, he can't use that money to help. So now he's started a nonprofit to get,
Yep.
help people when there's that window of need.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not, oh, you're clean and you're functioning. You're always in recovery, but you're functioning. You've got, it's just more than that. Or maybe you need to buy certain work equipment before you can start your job. Well, how do you afford it?
Right.
I
Right.
feel
Yeah.
like our society is not as understanding with
No,
this.
they're not. They're 100% not. And they just view them as the problem without understanding how they got there, what corrupt actors were involved getting them there.
Yeah.
And then I guarantee if everyone really understood, when you get out of inpatient at day 31 or day 91, whatever it is, like
Mm-hmm.
that's, to me, I always like, that's when you're done with basic training. Yeah, technically you're a soldier, but that doesn't mean you've like you
Really
still have
good.
such a far journey to go to become a capable warfighter. Like that's just step one. And I agree with you. Like I've talked to guys in the space, and it's just like it needs to be a policy change on. I would like to see the funding stay the same, but it's incentivized for that patient sit at 6, 12, 18 month long checkups. They have a job, they have a home, they have everything they need, but like the services continue down the road instead of just turn and burn 30, 60, 90-day things.
Exactly. And so if I'm correct, the our military veterans that suffer from PSTD, it really starts when they come home, right after they've left the action.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see something similar to that with recovering from addiction?
Yeah, like so that's why I think I was able to be so successful by the grace of God. I'm not in recovery, nor have I struggled with that. But
Hmm.
I'm pretty adept at knowing trauma. So PTSD is post traumatic stress disorder. Well, from my experiences with the people that I've known and worked with, addiction is trauma based or generational the majority of the time. Um, so I can appreciate, understand what happened to somebody as a young kid, unfortunately, but it's trauma based, and so they're searching for alternative outcomes to deal with that. And what better way than a painkiller to help kill the pain? But in reality, it's like you're not. We tell guys all the time, and now like we're going. I feel like such an old guy now because I like when I was growing up, it was like, oh, those old Vietnam guys. Well, I'm basically an old Vietnam guy now. Um, but fortunately, there's been a big shift in our culture of like, hey, man, like we're in this together. Like you can't carry that. Like you have you got to reach out for services or whatever. But more importantly,
Mhm.
like reach out to me. Like if you're struggling, like because I know what it's like to go through that. And an AA and an NA group is such a powerful framework for veterans as well. Just in the aspect of you sit together, you talk about your feelings, you express it, and there's no judgment attached to it. So those two communities are very similar because they're united through trauma.
It's a really good point. Okay, I'm going to read a little more from Paul's piece.
All right.
After surviving the 2-gram shot of Fenty, he spent 9 months relearning baseline functions, among them the ability to read. I'm getting better at it, he says. The big thing giving me trouble now is vowels. His left leg still drags, causing occasional stumbles, and his process memory has holes you could sail a barge through. I've been taking apart car engines all my life, and now I can't remember where the fuel lines go or how to set the pressures. Rooster laments. When asked how long ago his son died, he squints, counting backwards on both hands. 30 seconds later, I'm not for sure, he croaks. I have young timers bad. And that is just so shocking to me, even in my work with Narcan and naloxone. Yes, we know people who've been revived, but never had taken this much fentanyl. So Fenty, for our listeners and watchers, is fentanyl. And tell us a little more about Rooster.
Man, I'll never forget that day when Paul was doing those interviews and Rooster was in our conference room. And I know kind of roughly what has happened in their background before, but unless they specifically bring stuff up to me, I don't dig too much into it. I think that specific interview was probably like 2 hours long, with Rooster just unpacking everything from like a kid until now. And I remember that night, I have 7-year-old twins, and I just went home and like grabbed both of them and just sat in the chair and just said, your father loves you, right? So it meant so much to me. I just needed to hug my kids after hearing the story from Rooster, because it was just a horrific. No one could write the horrors that Rooster had gone through in his life. And to me, just to see him, the resilience of him, just wanting to get better and just having to overcome so much in his life. That's what I wish if people understood that, then they'd be a little less judgy and more, have a little bit more room for love for folks.
I agree. Our guest last week talked about a faith component. He was a heroin addict pre-fentanyl days, so for quite a while, maybe a decade, and it took him several times. What is your viewpoint on the faith aspect in recovery?
For me, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. It's important. Like I said, I'm not in recovery, but I've seen it. I've seen that power, and I don't lead with that because it can turn some folks off in the beginning. But I'd rather lead with my actions, and then down the road they discover that, if that makes sense. But regardless, you have to be willing to serve something greater than yourself. And to me, that's such the powerful component of the faith aspect. Because, opioids, drugs, alcohol is such a terrible, selfish device. We're doing however we entered into that space, right, wrong, or indifferent, we're seeking something to fulfill that void, instead of being of service to something greater than ourselves. And I think for the folks who could connect to faith and God, you can see such a bright light in their eyes, and it's a big reason for their success.
That's great to hear. So let's talk about Narcan and naloxone.
Sure.
Where do you keep it?
Well, I've we have some in the office, some in the gym, and I've got some in my car.
And what's your policy on it? Do you give it away? How do you get your naloxone?
Just by our relationship with the counseling center, like we can grab
Oh,
some. Um, it
great.
wouldn't if we ever needed it. Um, but I've seen it in use. Like so,
Tell us.
yeah. Unfortunately, the first time I ever saw it was when my really good friend ended up relapsing, and I came at the tail end of when the EMTs had already administered Narcan to him to get him back to life. So for me, it's just like I mean, people always try to frame this as like, are you for or against Narcan?
Right.
It's just
Hmm.
like if you only give two people, like let's not. People don't need just two options, right? So it's just like, all right, I'm for whatever saves somebody's life. You know what I mean? Like let's.
Exactly.
My buddy has a great line. It's like if people overdose and die, there's no treatment alive that can help them. So regardless of how many times they need it, they need this life saving medication. Um, and now, like even if you look at it, because so, basically, in my opinion, what people are saying if they're anti Narcan, they're just like, well, they get what they deserve. It's kind of is really what they're saying. Whether they won't ever admit that, but that's really
Right.
logically the argument they're making. Um, well, with today's drug supply, like a kid tries to get Adderall and it's laced, and if Narcan is not readily available, that person's going to die. Um, and the amount of fentanyl poisoning, and that's what people need to understand is like the guy that um, was Narcan and brought back to life, he would overdose again and he wouldn't make it
Mm.
because no
Is
one
this
was.
Billy?
Yeah,
Is
this is
this?
Billy.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because no one was around. Um, but he wasn't specifically using fentanyl or heroin. He was using cocaine, and the cocaine was laced with fentanyl, and that he died technically of fentanyl poisoning. So when we see these massive 100, 105, 110,000 people dying, I don't know what the percentages of them are, but a lot. I mean, a good number is from fentanyl poisoning. So they're using a drug that they don't know is laced with it, and that's what's killing a lot of them. So this medication is really the only first line defense we have against it.
No, and that's why we call this show The Poisoning, because people do not know what they're getting, and
Right.
there are foreign actors putting this into our
Yes.
country.
Yeah. I mean, it's putting my old military hat on. Like, it's a very effective technique that you know China's killing. It's the number one killer of military age males in our country. 48 to
Oh, wow.
18 to 45, drug overdose is the number one killer. It's not car wrecks. It's not gun violence. It's that. And from an asymmetric warfare, like the best way to, without even firing a shot, they're already taking a huge swath of our population out.
I knew it was the biggest killer of young people, but you just sort of blew my mind with military age men.
Yeah, 18 to
Yeah,
45.
they're trying to weaken us. I never thought of it in that
Yeah,
regard before, but that is another way of trying to defeat our country.
yeah, and then so we're losing um, that national treasure in itself. But
Yeah.
then like look at how much treasure money it's draining the system through Medicaid, incarceration. Like, just imagine if we could cut that healthcare cost in half related to that.
Oh, it would be huge what we could spend the
Right.
money
Yeah. And it's like, oh, now we have a surplus of money. Like, wonder what we could do with if we're not funding foreign wars and we're not funding this, that, and the other. Like, imagine what we could actually do with that money to invest in America.
Yeah, and especially in the small towns.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining today.
Oh,
Everyone, I recommend you go watch Small Town Strong. I watched it on Amazon, but there are multiple platforms you can stream it on.
yeah.
Is there any other words you'd like to say for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I would just, I would assume the majority of your listeners have experience in this area, unfortunately, and to the families of people who've lost somebody, like just know you're not alone.
Yeah.
Know it wasn't your fault, and through the tsunami of negativity and sadness that you're going through, you need to try to attach positive meaning to it. And if we can kind of all do that together, we can hope to make some sense out of this tragedy.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you for joining us, Dale.
Oh, my pleasure.
I ask that you rate, review, and share this episode with a friend.